Good afternoon. This is the last session of the conference entitled Reward, a New Way to Think About Recovery. My name is Jay Blaisdell, and I'm the program coordinator for the Bureau's Medical Impairment Rating Registry, and I'm also the managing editor of the Bureau's medical legal journal, Admirable Review. I'd like to start with a few housekeeping details that you've no doubt heard before, but they bear worth repeating. Please feel free to use Zoom's question and answer feature to ask questions when watching live. For everyone else viewing this on demand, you can still ask your questions on Slack. This session has its own Slack channel on the conference's communication hub. The link to this session's Slack channel is listed on the Sessions Hall webpage. After the session, please return to the Sessions Hall webpage and click Next at the bottom of the page and then click Submit. This will mark you as attending the session. To access the session hall, you will enter your email and access code. Make sure your email address is correct because typos will cause credits to not be counted. After clicking Submit, you will receive an email confirming that you submitted the form for attending this session. If you're seeking continuing education credits, please listen for the session key during the session. The session key will be your verbal key to unlock continuing education credit portion of the session hall form. Please feel free to write it down and type it in after you watch the session. Over the last year, I've had the distinct privilege of working with a very talented group of people and developing a new approach to recovery after a work injury. This initiative is now known as the Bureau's Reward Program. Rewards is an acronym and it stands for Return Employees to Work and Reduce Disabilities. I'd like to now introduce our speakers for this session. Nancy Kelly is a certified nurse case manager and occupational health nurse specialist. She's worked for Averitt Express in Cookeville, Tennessee since 2008, and she has had a long and distinguished career in risk management, workers' compensation, workplace safety, and disability management. Terry Horn has been a registered nurse for over 35 years. She is currently the director of 3 different programs at Vanderbilt: Corporate Health Services and Workers' Comp, Executive Health, and Corporate Health and Wellness. She has also served on committees for the National Head Injury Association, the Kentucky Head Injury Association, and our state's Medical Advisory Council. Dr. Robert Snyder is the Bureau's medical director. He joined us in 2014 after 37 years of private practice in orthopedic surgery. His activities with the Bureau include medical treatment guidelines, the drug formulary, utilization review, case management, fee schedules, and physician-provider communication. He is one of the principal instructors at the Bureau's annual Physician Education Conference, and he also plays a very supportive role in the Bureau's Medical Impairment Rating Registry and e-billing program. Dr. James Talmadge is the Bureau's Assistant Medical Director. He retired from private clinical practice in 2016 after 38 years as a treating physician in orthopedic and occupational medicine. I've had the great privilege of working with him for over 13 years, and I foremost think of him as a teacher, but he's much, much more than that. He's an adjunct professor in the Division of Occupational Medicine at Meharry Medical College in Nashville. He's also the author, co-author, editor, contributor to countless articles, journals, and books, including, most notably for our discussion today, the American Medical Association's guides to the evaluation of workability and return to work. Susie Douglas graduated from Vanderbilt University with a bachelor's degree of science in nursing. She is a registered nurse who has been with the Bureau for over 26 years. She currently serves as the Bureau's Medical Service Coordinator, and she has experience with medical case management, utilization review, the medical fee schedule, treatment guidelines, and the drug formulary. Last but certainly not least is Abby Hudgens, the administrator for the Tennessee Bureau of Workers' Compensation. She is our moderator for this afternoon's panel discussion. Abby was awarded the Francis Perkins Award for Innovation and Progressive Leadership in Workers' Compensation and Social Security, and has spearheaded the development of this reward program. Abby has been the national president of the International Association of Industrial Accident Boards and Commissions, the Southern Association of Workers' Compensation Administrators, and the Public Risk Management Association. We're very lucky to have Abby and the other panel members share with us today the philosophy behind and the components of a very exciting and innovative program. So without further delay, please welcome Abby Hudgens and our reward panel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay, and good afternoon, and welcome to the session called Reward, a new way to think about recovery. Before I begin, I want to encourage you to use the Q&A feature that you will find at the bottom of your screen. You can use it to make a comment or ask a question during the Q&A session after the panel presentation. Also be listening for the session key number, and we will reveal it twice during the panel. When the Bureau of Workers' Compensation rethinks recovery, we think about what needs to happen as soon as an employee is injured to improve recovery. We ask ourselves questions. Do we encourage employers to take into account the individual needs of injured workers, their work environment, their job demands, and do we encourage employers to focus on preventing injured workers from leaving the workplace before their time? Do we encourage medical providers to focus on recovery from day one? Do we help employees understand how important it is for them to focus on their own recovery? Many months ago, we formed a small task force that included employers who have successful return-to-work programs, a university health system, medical providers, and members of the Bureau workforce. The result of that group's work is a new program that we are unveiling today. It is called Reward: Return Employees to Work and Reduce Disabilities. I want to start our conversation today with a representative of an employer, Nancy Kelly. Nancy, would you tell us about Averitt Express's success in returning employees to work and reducing their disabilities?
Thank you, Abby and the Bureau. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this important topic. Averitt Express is a transportation company, and most of our associates are in the very heavy job classification. This can be a challenge with the return to work process. Because of those challenges, we started our return to work program at Averitt more than 10 years ago. We needed to provide modified duty for our associates who were transitioning back from a work-related injury. Averitt has more than 140 service locations, so we are not under one roof. We needed to be creative and to be able to provide productive, meaningful work within the associates' medical restrictions. This was a challenge, a big challenge. We partnered with a provider that specializes in placing injured workers in nonprofits in their local community. This modified duty helps them with their transition back to full duty. To date, we've had more than 500 placements at nonprofits all over the country. We view this program as a win-win-win. It's a shared goal between the company, the associate, and the community nonprofits. The goal is to help our associates transition back to full duty work. I would like to share 2 examples of our associates and their experience with the return to work process. The first example is Mr. Emil Farino. Mr. Farino drives a truck for us out of Tampa, Florida. He's a truckload driver and he has long routes. He was referred to our modified duty program after a shoulder injury. He had a unique nonprofit that was in his community. Here is his story.
What was your initial perception or thought about participating in the modified duty program?
Well, originally I was really taken aback, when they said, "Okay, you're going to do your modified over at a sanctuary." Okay, sanctuary of what? They said, "No, it's big cat rescue place." And I tell you what, I have always been a big fan of big cats. As a matter of fact, my wife and I have 6 rescue cats at home. Not the big cats, the regular cats. So it was exciting. My God, it turned out to be one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life.
That is very encouraging. As far as the modified duty program, how did your participation in it help you recover and return to work?
I learned so much about the behavior and reading the animals and interacting with the animals, and it actually took my mind off my injury, and it gave me complete new outlook on these animals. They're beautiful. They're amazing. Up to this day, my wife and I visit, quite regularly, and those animals will still remember me, and it's amazing.
That's exciting. It made an impact on you
For my entire lifetime.
Okay.
I have taken my son, I have taken my grandson to visit.
Now, you mentioned that it took your mind off your injury.
I actually did suffer a partial tear of the muscle, from my shoulder or my bicep. Being with the animals and being in a new environment, I think it helped. 50% of my rehab, was taking my mind completely off the injury. To me, it helped.
Yeah, that's a great story. I know we have talked with you before about your rehab, and I wanted to ask you, usually for people recovering from injuries, and this is about work-related injuries, barriers to return to work include things like depression, anxiety, loss of purpose, fear of re-injury, fear of doing something new outside of your comfort zone. Did you feel any of those fears, and how did you overcome them?
I have been injured before, even in the line of duty. And I knew, part of the getting over it was your rehab, concentrating and doing what you need to do, to recover and then get back to your normal life. Up to that point, I didn't suffer any of those feelings that could have prevented me, probably from recovering faster. But it was an amazing experience. It was something new, and like I said, it's something that I still, whenever my wife and I have a chance, we still pass by and go say hi to all the animals and Judy and the rest of the crew there.
Yeah, that's great. You have had a longer lasting impact with your modified duty program, even after your recovery and return to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It did wonders.
You have a wonderful story to tell, and we appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. It was, and like I said, it was a wonderful experience. It really was.
The second example is Mr. Gilbert Jackson. Mr. Jackson drove for Averett as a city driver for over 30 years. He was referred to our modified duty program after shoulder surgery. He was initially resistant to the referral, and after he returned to work, he retired. I called him recently to see how he was doing after being retired for 5 years. Here is his story.
My name is Gilbert Jackson. I live here in Cookeville, Tennessee, and I've been retired now for almost 5 years, I believe it is. And I was at Averett for 30-something years. I think like 32, 35 years. I can't even remember, to tell the truth. I got hurt one day at work and had to have shoulder operated on. And Nancy called me up and said something was going to put me in some kind of like a work program. I said, okay. It wasn't what I thought it was. To me, it was worse. She took me over to a senior center. I said, what am I going to do here, Then I got talking to one of the assistant directors, and she said, you'll be sitting at this desk, answering the telephone, doing paperwork, doing a little cleanup like that. As time went on, when I had time, I'd play a game of cards with them. And I was glad to see them. It's like I just couldn't wait to get there. And I just sat down and reacted with them, just talk to them, play cards with them, just keep them going. Because I think it was a great program. I said, that keeps these people active and not home on the couch wasting away. And that's what really got me at the Senior Center, that I can help by being there with them, talking to them, and be friends with them, and makes them want to come because it's someone they can relate to or whatever. So I just started doing that. I can't remember how long I worked there or stayed there, but I got things. I said, when I retire, I'm coming back over here and I'm joining this place. I said, these people have touched my heart, and I just can't believe how these people have affected me. It made me more humble-like, instead of just being grouchy, whatever at home, not doing anything. And like I said, I was apprehensive about it first going there because I didn't want to do this. But the more I stayed there, I didn't care about their part. I cared more about the people there. And that made me relax and just enjoy it. And then I feel good about doing that for them because that's my purpose, if you ask me, to keep them happy and keep them moving. I mean, like I said, it's a good experience for me. Like I said, I never thought this would happen. I'd be going there and do this job and get the heck out of there. But that didn't happen.
We've seen with this process that common negative themes show themselves with off work for long periods of time. So the recovery process includes things like isolation, anxiety, depression, fear of losing their jobs, fear of re-injury, being out of their comfort zone, overall physical deconditioning, and weight gain. Our experience has shown that returning associates to modified duty based on their medical restrictions benefits the injured worker in many ways. Having a forward-moving plan helps to offset potentially negative barriers to recovery.
Thank you, Nancy. What do you think is the most important component of AVERT's program?
I believe the most important component is just giving our associates hope of returning back to some type of normalcy after being injured on the job. That hope manifests itself in having some purposeful meaning, some structure back in their day. And we've really seen a lot of successful recoveries where in the past, we might not have seen that. So just getting out outside of their injury and being back a part of the community is very therapeutic.
So you give them hope that their injury is not the end of their life as they know it. And that's a wonderful aspect. And when the committee started working on the reward program, they looked at AVERT's program and they looked at other programs like it around the country before we started trying to decide what would be in Tennessee's reward program. We decided we could help employers if the Bureau developed a toolkit that they could use to realize the rewards of returning injured workers to the workplace as soon as possible. One of the most important parts of that toolkit is a way for employers to have panels of physicians who are of high quality. The Bureau is in the midst of developing a new, we hope, innovative program that will lead to a group of physicians that an employer can trust will help them get their employees back to work. It will help them understand, doctors who will understand the principles of early return to work and who will encourage injured workers about their chances of recovery and a return to their pre-injury life. The Certified Physician Program. Dr. Snyder, our medical director, was leading the group on the Certified Physician Program. Would you tell us about what will be required of a physician to be certified and the advantages you see such a certification would have for the employer.
Thank you, Abby. If the physician and other medical practitioners understand the needs of the employer as well as the actual job activities, they can aid encouraging injured workers to return to work in a safe and expeditious manner. Workers' compensation does have unique features presently not well understood by most physicians and other providers. Almost all of them are not trained on how to get patients specifically back to work. Usually the information they get is incomplete, especially from the patient, but also some from the case managers and the employers. The Certified Physician Program, or CPP, will educate physicians on some of the special processes necessary, both for getting the individual back to work and also providing a satisfactory workers' compensation practice. This will include education on causation, work restrictions, interactions with patients and particularly case managers, and dealing with adjusters, treatment guidelines, maximum medical improvement, permanent impairment, and the other duties in workers' compensation. The program will include didactic sessions as well as an examination. And there will be 2 levels of certification, one in basic training, about 8 hours, called Level 1, and further a Level 2 specifically for permanent impairment ratings with the AMA guides. There will also be a 3-year recertification requirement that in this case will include an assessment of the physician's performance meeting these goals. In addition, the physician will agree to certain requirements for reward employers, those are individuals that use the toolkit, to include timely and accurate reports and timely response to correspondence, acceptance of the appropriate patients, and understanding the needs of the employer and the insurer in a start to finish type of completion of the medical treatment for the injured worker. This will also include the forms. Returning to work coordinator and case manager interactions will be an important part of this overall goal. For the physicians, the incentive will include added reimbursement, reduced utilization review requirements, and bureau recognition and listing for potential inclusion on more panels. We will also include CME credits. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Dr. Snyder. We're blessed at the Bureau to have not 1, but 2 medical directors. We have an assistant medical director, Dr. Jim Talmadge, and he was very much involved in the developing the pieces of the toolkit. Dr. Talmadge, would you tell us about the tips for employers on how to choose the right medical providers and how an employer can maintain a good relationship with the providers it chooses?
Thank you, Abby. It's important to realize that returning injured workers to work as soon as it is safe is not just in the best interest of the employer and insurer, but it's actually well-researched and proven to be of major benefit to the employee. Studies prove the longer the injured workers are away from work, the smaller the likelihood of them ever returning to the workforce, not just with the original employer, but ever returning to any gainful employment. Permanent unemployment has major economic consequences for the injured worker and his or her family. Adults who are young enough to traditionally be in the workforce, but who become unemployed, have a higher rate of developing several serious diseases like cancer, heart disease, and even Alzheimer's. There are negative health consequences in the children of unemployed adults. Over 40 studies have confirmed that unemployed adults have an increased risk of death comparable to the risk of smoking, strongly suggesting that working age adult unemployment is a toxin to humans. Thus, our reward program on early and safe return to work benefits the injured worker. No medical school and very few post-medical school residency train doctors in how to assess workability and how to communicate work guidelines, euphemistically called work restrictions. Thus, employers and insurers should choose wisely in selecting physicians for inclusion on panels offered to injured workers. We are developing a toolkit for employers that will contain a section on how to choose physicians for the employer's required 3 or more doctor panels. One caveat is to seek out physicians willing to foreshadow expected improvement, both verbally to the employee at each visit and in writing to the employer, so that the employee understands improvement and healing with time means increased ability to do work-like activity, and so that the employer is prepared, when notified of decreased work restrictions, to modify the recovering worker's job assignment and tasks. Another caveat is to verify whether a physician has attained certification by the Bureau in the program Dr. Snyder just described, once that becomes fully operational. In the meantime, employers can ask prospective physicians if they have attended any of the Bureau's annual physician education seminars or the 2.5-day annual workers' compensation course sponsored by the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. Other hints on choosing widely are under development and will be in our final toolkit. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you. Let me ask you a quick question. You talked about foreshadowing. That was a term I really wasn't familiar with. Do you think that this practice of foreshadowing what can be expected, how the patient can be expected to improve by the next visit, is that something that already happens a lot, or is this something that doesn't happen as much as perhaps should happen?
I think it's the latter. The American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons has his workers' compensation course where we teach foreshadowing, and the attendees coming for the first time pretty much universally say, I never thought of that. I wasn't taught that. That they're taught, develop a treatment plan and at least have the treatment plan in your own mind. But the step of explaining the treatment plan and explaining expected recovery is not something that physicians are typically taught. And yet, as the injured worker, if you're told in 2 weeks you're going to be able to do more than you're able to do now, we need to get you over this next 2 weeks, build up in strength, build up in endurance. It sets the worker's expectation that with time, with healing, comes increased ability. In baseball, we call that spring training. In football, we call that August. In work, it should be foreshadowing of the improvement that will come with increased activity and time to heal.
So it sounds to me that if you had a doctor on your panel who foreshadows, you'd be a step ahead on getting your employee to recovery. Nancy, I wanted to ask you, because I think you've got a really good process of having good panels and good relationships with your doctors. What have you done to establish such good relationships?
Thank you, Abby. I think it's important to invite your physicians on site if you can. We've invited quite a few of our local physicians on site to our corporate campus, and they, of course, understand what transportation is. They see our trucks on the road, but we sit down and show them more of what our drivers do every day, show them who we are as an employer, and help them understand what our expectations are. Our drivers do have to be able to lift 80 pounds to return to work, and that is a very high heavy job classification. So that expectation is very high. It's not sedentary work. So we help establish that we understand the recovery process might be longer. It might we might need to authorize more physical therapy for shoulder surgeries. But I think those expectations and that communication is so important. A previous employer that I worked for, we were under one roof. It was a manufacturing facility, and we were able to have them go out on the manufacturing floor and actually work on the machinery. And that's very helpful for physicians to understand what these adult employees are doing every day at work.
And just to follow up, you all have had a pretty good track record with getting people back to work, even though you have that 80-pound lifting requirement, right?
We certainly try. We are above the national average. We usually have about an 80% return to work rate, and there's a lot that goes into that. We rely on a team. It's a team effort with our adjusters, our doctors. We use case management all over the country, along with our modified duty program. So there's a lot of different opportunities to keep the associate moving forward with that team approach. And we do have, barriers and obstacles, and we do our best to work through those. And if an associate cannot return to work, we feel like we've done whatever we can do to help them. And if they have to do something else occupationally, we hope we've prepared them post-injury to be able to move on with their life and move forward.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. Now we have another employer who's developed an effective program to return employees back to work, and that's the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Terry Horn is with us, and Terry, I wondered if you would tell us about Vanderbilt's program.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. And thank you, Abby, for having us today. We're excited to be a part of the reward program and be a part of this conference. Vanderbilt has had a return to work program in place for more than 15 years. At that time, Dr. Mary Yarbrough, in coordination with the Occupational Health Clinic and Human Resources, as well as other departments, designed a program to assist our injured employees return to work in a safe and timely manner, as they began to recognize that some of our employees were falling through the cracks and not returning to the workplace. Our program provides a return to work coordinator who actually works with the injured employee, their supervisor, and other team members to coordinate efforts in getting them back into their work environment. She coordinates other team member efforts. She offers suggestions for return to work job duties when there are restrictions. She listens to all of the parties and is the great communicator to work through any perceived issues. Because Vanderbilt is such a large employer, this is really no small feat. Sherry Spray, who is the return to work coordinator for this special program, provides return to work services to the medical center and to the university, which encompasses approximately 30,000 employees. Sherry's with us today, and I'd like to give her an opportunity to talk about what she does to enhance the employees' return to work experience. Sherry, thank you for joining me today. My first question for you is, what are some of the biggest successes with Vanderbilt's return to work program?
That's a good question. One of the biggest successes is that most injured workers get to participate in the return to work program, resulting in very little lost time. One of the ways to achieve this outcome is to focus on what the employee can do rather than what they can't do. Getting too focused on what an employee is not able to do on restrictions can be more difficult with trying to work with the injured employee. So you want to focus on the positives for success of your program. Another way to help achieve decreased lost time is to let the employee engage in the process as much as possible. Allow the employee to have input and help come up with productive tasks they feel can be performed within their restrictions. We find that the employee can come up with tasks or ideas that may not have been thought about by others. Often the employee knows their department and the needs of the department as well as anyone. If you allow the employee to have input, the employee feels more valued and still part of the team, and in turn can help boost morale. Good communication especially listening, is so important during the return to work process. I would say another thing that has been successful with the return to work program is that we have formed a return to work committee. Having a return to work coordinator is vital for the daily management of the return to work program. However, a committee can be a great resource when occasions arise that need decisions made that may affect other departments that are involved with the case of the injured worker. The committee at Vanderbilt may consist of members from several departments such as occupational health, risk management, and human resources. The Return to Work Committee also participates in a teleconference call with the manager at the end of an employee's return to work program if the employee is still unable to return to full duty. This provides guidance for a smooth transition from the return to work program to next steps that may need a continuing or a long-term plan. The committee can also answer any questions that the manager may have at this time.
Sherry, that's an interesting comment. Because you're planning return to work efforts for a very large employer, what is your biggest challenge when getting an employee back to work?
Yeah, given the size of Vanderbilt, we have many opportunities for employees to transfer departments or be promoted to other positions. It can be challenging when there is a new manager in the injured workers department, or if employees change departments once an injury has occurred. These changes at times can result in employees with restrictions going home if a manager isn't sure how to accommodate the employee, or if a new manager doesn't have experience with the return to work program. Reaching out to educate managers and assist them with getting the employee back to work as soon as possible is crucial for the success of the return to work program and for a positive outcome for the employee. There will be ongoing challenges, but challenges can be managed effectively with a comprehensive return to work program and with a consistent and reliable reporting system.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate you joining us today. Abby, I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you. And I have one follow-up question for both you and for Nancy. You all are both large employers. Do you think the program we're talking about is only for large employers, or do you see a way that smaller employers could benefit from the reward program?
I'll
Let's
go
start
first.
with you, Terry.
Okay, thank you. I actually see the rewards program more utilized by small and medium-sized employers than the large employers. Large employers typically have return to work programs in place. I think that the rewards program will enhance what large employers have to offer, but I think that it will be a roadmap and a guideline for small and medium-sized employers.
Nancy?
I agree with Terry. I believe that there's an opportunity that a lot of employers might not recognize to help the injured worker return. And this is a stamp of approval by the state of Tennessee and employers to say, bring those employees back to work, communicate with them, let them know that you are looking forward to welcoming them back. And if it has to be in a modified position for a temporary time, let's come up with something and let's be creative and let's get you back to where we can get you feeling good and doing productive work and being amongst your coworkers who look forward to having you back. And I think that everybody wants that message, and everyone wants to hear that if they're recovering from a work-related injury, and it's a great opportunity for employers to participate in this. Thank you.
I agree, obviously. Before we go forward, though, let me remind you to use the chat feature if you want to share a comment or ask a question at the end of the panel session. And by the way, now's the time I'm going to tell you what the session key is. It is 3317. Now, I'll remind you that one more time, but jot it down, 3317. An important component to any successful reward program is for the employer to have someone available to serve as a return to work coordinator, much as Terry was telling us about at Vanderbilt. Susie Douglas and Brian Holmes from the Bureau have been working on that part of the reward program. Susie, would you tell us about the important impact a return to work coordinator could have on an employer's ability to reduce the negative impact of a work comp injury?
Yes, Abby, thank you for that question. I would be happy to address that. Creating a reward program begins with support of top management. The responsibility for implementing the program may be divided among team members or given to one primary individual. While a return to work coordinator is the ideal candidate for leading the collaborative process of returning the employee to work, not all employers need a full-time coordinator to have a successful program. Please keep in mind that the functions of this coordinator may be performed on a part-time basis by individuals already employed with the employer who have other job titles. So employers of all sizes can benefit from the strategies of the return to work coordinator. Employees are often considered to be the most important part of a business. Retaining those experienced employees after an injury requires their involvement. The return to work coordinator works directly with these employees and engages and fosters their participation. Unlike the adjuster, the case manager, or a physician, the injured employee may already know the return to work coordinator since they both work for the same company. The coordinator will personalize the employee's recovery experience, answering questions and addressing fears. As Nancy mentioned, some of these issues earlier, contacting the employee after physician visits and identifying needs, and sometimes just listening are very important functions of the coordinator. While many injured employees readily act upon their motivation to return to work when medically appropriate, others need assistance. Some may view returning to work and recovering as conflicting goals. These employees will benefit the most from the interactions with a return to work coordinator. The coordinator provides support, resources, and the encouragement that employees, hesitant or otherwise, may need to navigate and be actively involved throughout the process of returning to work. Other advantages provided by the coordinator include researching transitional job possibilities and duties, identifying potential job modifications, and ensuring that the physical job demands analyses are available. Communication with the physician and the case manager throughout this process is also important. A quintessential part of a successful reward program is to create and maintain a genuinely conducive return to work culture, which again starts with top management. Ideally, the return to work coordinator directs this initiative even before there's an injury through communication with management, supervisors, fellow employees. After the injury, the return to work coordinator continues to steer this positive return to work culture, which offers the most optimal outcome for the employee and the employer. Employers do have a choice of selecting one individual to perform these duties or dividing up the services among a team. And either way, the return to work coordinator services are instrumental in a successful reward program.
Given how important the return to work coordinator position is, one of the tools in the toolkit is return to work coordinator training and a curriculum. Brian Holmes has been working on that project. Brian, would you tell us a bit about the training that we have planned and the resources that will be available to employers through the reward program?
Certainly, Abby. As Nancy and Susie and Terry have indicated, that not all people who create a return to work, not all companies that create a return to work program are going to be large companies. And so we want to make sure that the medium-sized or smaller companies have return to work coordinators that have the knowledge and tools necessary to have a successful return to work program. So we're planning a virtual training program for the spring, and while the details are still being worked out, I envision a program that teaches practical skills by also helping return to work coordinators establish relationships across industries and with return to work coordinators to collectively support each other and fine-tune their own return to work programs. We know that everyone is busy and plan to seek an approximately 1 hour a week virtual commitment for virtual trainings for 6 to 8 weeks. The training will cover elements such as an intro to the basics of workers' comp, obtaining commitment to the program from executives and supervisors, the role of the return to work coordinator, things to do before an injury occurs, such as pre-injury communication and engagement, interpersonal skills, such as motivational interviewing, persuasion and influencing skills, helping people face their fears and lead them through change, and reflective listening. We plan to use experts to provide instruction on job descriptions and job demand analysis, and to teach how return to work coordinators how to work with physicians from start to finish and best practices when sending injured workers to these physicians. COVID pending, I hope to bring the class cohort together to culminate what was learned virtually and further their relationship development amongst classmates. And what return to work coordinators learn from each other and the interpersonal skills they will have will make a tremendous difference to each injured worker.
Thanks, Brian. Dr. Talmadge told us about one of the tools in the toolkit, but there are a lot of tools in that toolkit. Dr. Talmadge, would you tell us about some of the other tools?
Yes, thank you, Abby. In addition to an expanded section on how to choose a panel physician, we will have several additional tools in the reward toolkit. Tools under development currently include, first, tips on how to maintain a good relationship with doctors on the employer's panel, including the importance of communicating clearly who at the employer and who at the insurer is the appropriate contact person, and how to both phone and email those two people. Another tool, Susie just mentioned the term job demand analysis. There is a difference between a job description and a job demand analysis. The traditional job description suffices for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act in hiring and reasonable accommodation disputes, but unfortunately does not typically provide the information needed for a physician to opine on a worker's safe ability to do a specific job. A job demand analysis is different. It requires someone with ergonomic expertise to go into the workplace and actually measure things like the size and weight of objects handled, the distances, times, forces, and repetitions involved in a specific work task. Many physical therapy or occupational therapy providers often offer this service. Larger employers would be wise to consult with such a provider and obtain a job demand analysis on several jobs that could be offered as temporary modified duty to injured workers. The jobs appropriate for a recovering worker with a hand or shoulder injury may not be appropriate for a worker with a foot or knee injury, and vice versa. Return to modified duty results in better medical treatment outcomes for the injured worker. Other tools being developed for the toolkit will include a model employer's return to work policy, a model packet of information to send with the injured worker to a first visit with a physician, a model return to work plan for specific injured worker, videos demonstrating communication between the employer's return to work coordinator and the insurance adjuster, between that return to work coordinator and the authorized treating physician, and between the return to work coordinator and the employee. We'll also develop a sample form to track communication on a specific injury case so that nothing gets lost in the process. We are excited as a team as we anticipate developing and implementing this program. So thank you, Abby.
Thank you. And it's clear that the reward name is more than just an acronym. We really will make it possible for both the employer and the employee to get rewards from this program. Brian, one of the most important components of the reward program is a new recognition program for employers. Would you tell us about that part of reward?
Yes, Abby, the Bureau is committing to an annual award for employers who epitomize the essence of the reward program. Reward employers will be noted in a press release from the Bureau that will be sent to local news agencies. And the Bureau's website will also list employers who are recognized for having a reward culture that values employees. Being on the annual honor roll will not only be prestigious, but such a program will correlate with a positive return on investment. Reward employers will be recognized for their commitment to returning employees to work based upon 3 key indicators: employer commitment, employee engagement, and results. Employer commitment is based on a variety of factors, and in my opinion, it begins with the accident prevention and safety programs. A non-injured worker is the best case scenario for everyone. An employer's leadership backing sets a vision for reward principles, can help push through roadblocks, engage supervisors, market the program for the positivity it brings, and help injured workers view this as a valuable benefit to working for the employer. More importantly, leadership's commitment is a first step towards establishing a work culture where return to work is expected, injured workers feel valued, and they feel supported as they recover. Supervisors are the most important part of return to work. Their ability to leverage personal relationships with employees will make or break the reward culture. The return to work coordinator duties must be assigned. A pool of physicians who understand the reward principles must be engaged. Panels vetted, jobs analyzed, and communication organized. The employer's commitment to return to work is a vital component for having a successful reward culture, and that is why the commitment is part of the reward recognition program. Employee engagement is also another key component. After all, isn't the return to work decision ultimately up to the injured worker? And when I say employee engagement, I don't necessarily mean each individual injured worker. I'm also referring to the collective employee as well. Are employees involved in the reward plan creation, modification, and improvement decisions? Do they have a mechanism for identifying modified job duties and tasks? Do they actively look to help an injured colleague? Or do they say, great, now I have even more work to do because Billy got hurt? Employee engagement comes with a reward culture. Injured workers who understand the cost of a work injury to themselves and their family go way beyond the work comp costs are more likely to engage the reward program. From the first date of hire, employees should expect to be taken care of after a work injury. This includes returning to work to facilitate the healing process, and they should not fear losing their job because of the work injury. The third key indicator is results, or return on investment. I read an article a while ago about how Kohl's department stores were focusing on reward principles. Kohl's is in a very competitive industry, one where we are seeing competitors reduce stores and close altogether. Prior to the pandemic, they were one of the few profitable department stores. They paid out $1.2 billion in dividends in the 2 years prior. They saw reward as good business. They defined it as part of their identity. It matched the company's core values, and it was evidence that employees mattered. Return on investment is a fairly simple term. It's simply the difference between what is given and what is received in return. Determining return on investment, though, can be tricky. Multiple factors such as workers' compensation claim costs, employee replacement costs, production variances up and down, and reward input costs are a start. Research also shows improvements in workforce morale, effective true recovery, and loyalty being contributions to an employer as a result of a reward program. One company I talked to told me they measure the worth of the reward program by reduced days of disability. In this rather simple method, they compare the cost of a quicker return to work with the cost of productivity loss. In addition to the competitive advantages created by a positive return on investment and recognition from the Bureau as an employer who values employees, reward employers will have access to a proverbial village of return to work coordinators to keep up to date with latest trends, techniques, and advances within the return to work community. We plan to host virtual lunch and learns and meetings with industry experts, in addition to adding return to work training to our educational conference and include conference registration. It takes a village to do many things correctly, and I want Tennessee to have a strong return to work village.
Nancy, you're an employer. How does this employer recognition program sound to you?
Abby, thank you. I think it sounds exciting. The culture of return to work should be a natural thing, and I don't believe it is a natural thing. And this program can help us get to that as a group of employers with the state of Tennessee. And it's exciting to have the toolkit available to show employers how to start the process if they don't have this in their culture of return to work.
Thank you, Nancy. Terry, I wanted to ask you to talk about one of the aspects we talked about the employer recognition program that we thought would make a difference. And that would be to provide the opportunity for employers who are interested in reward to come together and to share. Would you share with everyone some of the things we've been talking about?
Of course, you know how excited I am about the opportunity for employers to participate in the rewards program, because it will offer specific training on how to build or improve their current return to work efforts. In addition to the informative website and toolkit, we will also be offering educational opportunities for employers, physicians, and return to work coordinators, step-by-step guidance on the return to work process and how to interact with injured workers to return them to the workplace in a manner that will decrease the tension and anxiety of getting them back into their work family. We've talked about hosting lunch and learns. We've talked about having focus groups to talk about successes in their return to work program, what works for them, what isn't working, where can we make improvements. So as this program comes together, I believe that Tennessee will be leading the nation in returning its injured workers to the work site.
We certainly hope so. One of the big takeaways from a reward program is there is so much to gain from it, for both the employer and the employee. And I want to share with you a clip of a young man who spoke at last year's conference, Travis Reynolds. But before we hear from Travis, let me remind you one last time that the session key is 3317. Now let's hear from Travis.
So let me say, if I hadn't had Nucor's support, it takes a team. It really does. It takes a dedicated team, especially when you got a catastrophic injury like mine, to get the employee back to work. And with Nucor's willingness to work with me and my family on anything that I needed, I never had to ask for it. If I needed it, it was get it for him, get it for his family. In a world we live in today, I think a lot of people's first option is to hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit. I didn't want to go down that road because Nucor stood by me. Nucor provided everything that I needed. They even sent meal plans to the house. They even had somebody mowing our yard. My wife, not knowing that her husband's going to make it through the first night, she never thought about any of that stuff. So having an employer that backs you and that cares about you, not just you, but your family, and cares about getting you to work, it's amazing. I couldn't see myself working for anybody else for the rest of my life. But yeah, it takes a dedicated team. It really does. So, you know, you have your employer, you have your insurance, you have your workers' compensation advocate like Shirley, and then you have your doctor and your medical treatment. So, you know, you have to have everybody on the same page. And you know, I know sometimes that doesn't always happen. But yeah, it's very important, I feel like, to have an employer that's going to back you and be with you by your side through the whole process. And Nucor has done that. But but yeah, if it hadn't been for Nucor and for Shirley doing what they done, I probably wouldn't have come back to work. I'm just being honest with you. I probably would have just stayed home and been on disability or whatever it is that you get on. But yeah, but Nucor has backed me 100% through everything, and they still are. So yeah, if you want to get an employee back to work, that has to be a part of it. And you know, unfortunately, I'm sure you have too. We all have heard of horror stories that somebody gets hurt and they get fired or whatever it is the case may be, or they try to get rid of the employee. You know, it's a bad road to go down.
My last question to the panel is, what is the most important of the coming part of the coming reward program in your estimation? What difference can it make for employers and employees? Susie, let's start with you.
Thank you, Abby, for that question. So I feel like, of course, the part that I'm working on, the return to work coordinator's role, really helps involve the employee to be more active participant in returning to work and being able to address those concerns and those fears. The employee realizes the employer values the employee and that you can return and recover, and those are not conflicting goals. So it's better for the employee and it's better for the employer to maintain that employee.
Thank you. Dr. Snyder, what are your thoughts?
The key to all of this seems to be communication. And so if the physicians are aware of how to communicate and what to communicate, if the patients are engaged with communication, and if the coordination between the employer and the physician and the employee is a solid triangle, it certainly will benefit the entire system and each individual component.
Nancy, what say you?
I think this return to work process starts with the day the injury occurs, Abby. I think that it's so essential to calm the fear and anxiety of the injured worker with a plan and a focus on recovery and steps on how to recover with the team and forward moving towards the goal of return to work. And that's not always easy. It's not always successful, but we know that the positives outweigh the negatives, and we are dealing with working adults who this might be the only job they've ever had or the only occupation they've ever had. So you are helping them through a traumatic process sometimes, and with a plan and with healthcare providers, all working together and to the goal of return to work or some type of successful vocational plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Talmadge?
I'll piggyback on what Susie and Nancy said. The reason the Bureau exists is to help the worker who's unfortunately injured at work. That's what we're all here to do. And it's clear from science that if we can get injured workers back into the workplace, modified duty at first, transitional duty, we can get them back, they're more likely to stay in the workforce, which has economic benefits to the worker and the worker's family. but the health outcomes are better, both when we measure the specific injury. If you injure your shoulder, you get a better outcome medically if you go back to work, but also in terms of just general health. You don't die off as early. So the rewards to the worker, the real benefit. Yes, the employer would get a benefit of perhaps reduced work comp costs, but the benefit is really there for the employee, and that's our focus.
Terry, what about you? What do you think?
I agree with everything that's been said by the previous panelist. I would say that if we learn anything from the rewards program, it would be to listen to the employee, to support them, to support their family members, and to help them return to their jobs. Work is such an important part of a person's life. Many times it becomes their identity. And if we are not able to help them return to what they love to do and become another part of their work family again, we're failing them in some way. So I'm excited about the reward program. I think it's going to have a pathway for all employers to be able to return injured workers back to the workplace in a safe manner.
And Brian, we'll let you have the last word on this question.
I kind of agree with everybody, but I want to kind of be a bit more narrow in my focus here and say, I think the injured employees' willingness and determination, probably determination is probably a better word, to come back to work, knowing that they have a program that will take care of them and expect that their time off from work after work injury is going to be very short, and that they'll get back to meaningful, engaged lives with their employer. So just getting employees to believe that, to expect that, I think is the key component.
So it sounds like there's not just one most important thing. There are a lot of important parts to the reward program. What we provided to you today is just a glimpse of the coming reward program. Watch the Bureau's website in January for more information on the toolkit, the employer recognition program, and the physician certification program. They will be available after the first of the year. And now I see we have some questions, so I'll turn it over to Jay to field the questions that you all have submitted.
Hi, everyone. Again, this is Jay Blaisdell, and we're going to move into a question and answer session before we announce our door prize winner. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. Abby Hudgens, Nancy Kelly, Cherry Horn, Dr. Robert Snyder, Brian Holmes, Dr. James Talmadge, and Susie Douglas for sharing their thoughts with us today. Looks like we have about 22 minutes to answer questions that came in during the presentation. For those of you at home, feel free to continue to ask your questions using the Q&A feature of Zoom or via the Slack app if we run out of time. We will answer as many questions as time allows. If you are watching this on demand rather than live, you can still submit questions and we will answer them in the same format that you asked them. So to begin with, this is a question for Nancy. Would you find it equally beneficial for a physician specialist representative or a physical occupational therapist or ergonomic specialist to view employee physical demands in place of specialty surgeons who often have difficulty finding time in their busy schedule for these activities?
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Absolutely. I think that it's always beneficial to have healthcare providers work with you to establish a return to work plan and review job descriptions, physical demands, especially in heavy job categories, transportation. Sometimes healthcare can be included in that, of course, construction, outdoor types of jobs, it's always beneficial to have other specialists that deal with our injured workers, and we rely on physical therapy very much and occupational therapy very much. And I'm always interested to know how they're viewing our injured worker and what we can do to help them through the process.
Thank you, Nancy. The next question is more of a comment. It says the program would have been made considerably stronger by the inclusion of someone who represents workers and can voice their concern from a first-hand perspective. We appreciate that comment. The next question is a Robert Snyder, Dr. Robert Snyder question. When will the physician certification program start and how much will it cost?
We can anticipate that the program will start in January of 2022. Information will be coming out in the summer of 2021. The cost of the program, we do not know yet. There will be CME credits available, so I think that cost at least will have to be offset.
Thank you, Dr. Snyder. This question is for Susie Douglas. Of all the responsibilities that the Return to Work coordinator has, which, in your opinion, is the most important?
Hey, thank you for that question. Great question. It's also a difficult question because all of the functions are so important, and certainly helping to maintain that genuine return to work culture is among the top. But I think the most important is going to be the return to work coordinator's ability to promote and really to foster an injured worker's active engagement in his or her recovery. I think that's the top function. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Dr. Talmadge would like to comment on the previous comment, the comment being the program would have been made considerably stronger by the inclusion of someone who represents workers and can voice their concern from a first-hand perspective. Dr. Talmadge, would you like to comment on that?
Well, we did not include either a plaintiff attorney or a defense attorney to give either side of that perspective. If the question was from a plaintiff attorney, I think it's a time constraint issue, but Jay, you're the moderator. Did you plan this session?
It's a good question. I agree with the comment that we need to seek the firsthand perspective of employees, and I think that's a very valid concern. And moving forward, I think we'll be down in the trenches. We will be talking with employers, and we're also going to be talking with the employees of these employers. Next question would be for Nancy Kelly. Have you ever had a situation where modified duty did not work well for the injured worker?
Thank you, Jay. Yes, of course. We've had a few barriers or a few times where things didn't work out as we planned. And, you know, we're expecting that. We expect that to happen occasionally. And it might have been that we started an employee in a modified duty position and they had to be pulled off and have other care or whatever, just part of their recovery process. I know that one time we placed an injured worker in a facility that was doing animal type care. He was interested in animals, so we thought it'd be a great matchup, and come to find out he was allergic to cats, and he didn't really realize that until, so we had to put him in a different placement site. And then we have associates who might not feel comfortable, and so we have to guide them through the process and you know, just encourage them, meet us at the placement visit. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what's fearful to you. And, you know, the goal is return to work. And as I said previously, if our injured associates also share that goal and are ready to get back in that truck, this is their step towards that. They might not be quite ready. They might need more physical therapy. And this just provides them those stepping stones forward. And it also, you know, these are very challenging times. 2020 is very challenging. So we're having barriers in some of our nonprofits for the COVID, and we're having to adjust to that. We've had to pause in some situations. So I think that you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to pivot and say, okay, we're going to take a break, but then we're going to restart. This is when we're going to restart, and this is what the plan is. And that helps to dispel a lot of fear of, if you're not communicating, fear tends to build up. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate you underscoring the fact that you do have to be flexible. You said adapt and pivot. And it underscores that this whole initiative is a work in progress. We are going to be including employees at the beginning of January. So we are in the middle of this initiative, and it's far from complete. So we're just going to keep addressing issues as we see them come up. And the issue with the employee being allergic to cats is a case in point on the necessity to be flexible. This question is for Dr. Talmadge. What can employers do to get a physician to to foreshadow improvements with patients?
Jay, communication is the key here, as Bob Snyder said. So if a physician is not foreshadowing and every change in workability recorded on forms the employee takes back to the employer comes as a surprise, so the employer isn't ready to shift to a different job, the work comp coordinator or the human resource or safety person who works with injured workers can request a short meeting, like an office appointment with the treating physician, and agree to pay for the charge that would be an office visit charge for that amount of time, and explain the company's return to work program, interest in return to work, and need for the employee to receive in the office foreshadowing of potential improvement, and the need of the employer to receive that same foreshadowing in writing in the physician note for each visit. So it's something that may need to be communicated to the physician who isn't doing it because he or she isn't aware that it should be done or could be done.
Thank you, Dr. Talmadge. This question is for Brian Holmes. Will there be a cost for the return to work coordinator training? And if so, do you know how much?
If there is a cost, it'd be very similar to what we do for the adjuster training, where the costs simply represent the cost to us to put the show on the road, if you will. Given that we're currently looking at doing a virtual type training, if there is cost, to be very minimal. We have not gotten that far in the planning.
And since we're on the discussion of cost, this one is for Dr. Talmadge. How much does a job demand analysis cost typically, the employer?
I have never paid a bill for one, so I don't know. It would depend obviously on travel time for the professional to get to the employer, the number of jobs that are chosen, and the specific measurements that have to be made on each individual job. So I think fees would vary considerably, but I've never had to pay for one, so I don't know.
A good question. This one is for concerning the physician certification program, Dr. Snyder or Dr. Talmadge. Will it include virtual training or be in person, or will it be a mixture of both?
It is likely to be a mixture of both, even if we get to the point where we get an effective vaccine and get back to quote unquote some semblance of normal. It is still likely that the virtual platforms and online training is going to be an important part of our future educational efforts, both within the profession, but also at the Bureau.
Yeah, it seems a lot of changes are going to take place after this pandemic, probably a lot more virtual training and interactions of all kinds of sorts.
Could I make a comment about what Dr. Talmadge and Nancy Kelly said? The use of the word foreshadowing is not a new concept. The concept of setting expectations, we do that in all sorts of scenarios. The fact that even if you fail at your initial attempt at an alternative work solution for a worker that's not yet at full duty, by setting expectations about when you're going to revisit, even if the individual is allergic to cats, or for a physician to just set expectations of what's to be expected at the next visit. That's really what foreshadowing means, and it's not a new concept. We use it all the time.
Almost sounds like a matter of psychology, just planting that seed of expectation for the employee.
Hey, Jay.
Sure.
Jay, can I take a second here to address some of the things in the question and answer from this anonymous attendee?
Sure.
I think that what's maybe being missed in these comments, and forgive me for lecturing here, the title of this conference is Rethink Recovery. And what we're trying to do here is introduce some different ways maybe people haven't thought of to help the injured worker recover. And bringing employees back to work helps them recover. The longer they're out of work, the less likely they are to ever get back to work. There's all kinds of studies out there that show this fact. The most one that comes to mind is from the state of Washington, was there a monopolistic state where they're showing that a 6 month stay out of work results in X disability, consecutive quarters. I want to say it's 8 consecutive quarters out of work. The likelihood to come back to work is less than 5%. So these things that Averitt Express does as far as bringing people into something meaningful, that they have reason to get up in the morning, to go to things as opposed to sitting at home, is not just for Averitt's benefit, it's also for the injured workers' benefit. There's throughout this conference, I've heard some different things about how the law applies to things. And it's my opinion that the law is the minimum that's out there. And when we're talking to follow, and when we're talking about rethinking recovery, we're talking about doing more than the minimum and doing things that help your company or your employees recover better, and not just save a few bucks on temporary disability benefits, but also to improve your bottom line with employee replacement costs, or to reduce the amount of debt an injured worker goes into because their wages have been cut by 2/3 to 66 2/3 of their average weekly wage. while they're sitting at home. And the number of workers who live paycheck to paycheck that are out there, especially as we've seen in this economy, is really high. And that continued deficit in income can have a negative effect on them, their mental state, their family, and their financial situation. Forgive me for going on a tangent.
Thank you, Brian. We've got another question here, and it doesn't say who it's for, so anyone can answer this. If an injured worker is sent to a modified duty placement and is re-injured, who bears the cost of treatment, the original employer or the modified employer? Anyone want to? Nancy Kelly, would you like to answer that?
I can. When our associates are in a modified duty position at one of the nonprofits, they are under our HR. And so we are covering them. And that is the agreement that we have with the nonprofits. And I just want to say the nonprofits that we team up with are used to working with people in that type of environment. It's a helpful environment. It's an encouraging environment. And we don't use nonprofits that don't have some type of meaningful work. Our experience was that we could not provide modified duty well on our docks or in our dispatch offices. It was not a good fit. It's a very busy type of work, and we felt like it's a safer environment for them to be working in their communities, in helping their communities. And we have a number of associates who volunteer at those nonprofits now, and it's just a very encouraging environment. And I know there are probably other examples of this type of modified work where it was not done well, or it was viewed as retaliatory, or the injured worker was asked to do things that were not meaningful and productive. And we have to try our best to avoid those situations. Fortunately, we work with Habitat for Humanity, the Red Cross, the United Way, Blood Assurance, big nonprofits located in all kinds of rural areas that we're located in. And we make referrals on our associates who've been off work for a while or will be off work for a while, but that have big potential to return to work. And so again, our referrals are made by our adjusters. Our adjusters are all Tennessee certified adjusters. They know what they're doing. They work hand in hand. And we just feel like this is a great fit for our culture and our company. And I think that we have more positive stories we can share in the future. And I look forward to meeting with Terry Horn at Vanderbilt and other employers to share return to work success and ideas, and just planning for the future for these workers who need hope and encouragement.
Thank you so much, Nancy Kelly. That's about all the time we have for questions here on Zoom, but that doesn't mean your questions have to stop. After this, head over to Slack and ask your questions in this session's Slack channel. As a reminder, the presentation was recorded and will be placed on the session hall within 24 hours. Feel free to watch it again if you missed the session key or you want to catch one of the key points raised. It'll be available for on-demand viewing through November 13th. Let's talk about the prize drawing for the scavenger hunt. Before we sign off, one of you is about to win $150 American Express gift card. So this drawing contains the names of anyone who has correctly completed the scavenger hunt in the virtual exhibit hall. To select the winner, we used the rubber ducky method. For those of you unfamiliar with the rubber ducky method, I wrote a different name on each of the 64 rubber ducks that I bought on Amazon. I put all of the rubber ducks on a slip and slide on a steep hill, and I turned the water on. It was a very close race, but the name on the rubber duck that came in first was Charles Clemens. Congratulations, Mr. Clemens. You have won a $150 American Express gift card. We will be contacting you soon. Thank you for attending this presentation. We hope that you found it interesting and helpful. I want to thank once again all of the panelists for their insightful contributions and for everyone who asked a question or made an insightful comment. Before we close, Bureau Administrator Abby Hudgens will share a few closing remarks. Please make sure you return to the session hall webpage to rate the session, provide feedback, and to request continuing education credits. Remember to click Next and then Submit to confirm that you've watched this session and to request the appropriate type of continuing education credits. Thank you to everyone who has visited our exhibit hall and virtual pumpkin patch. Your donations are doing more than putting pumpkins on a screen. They're creating scholarships. The patch will remain open until November 13th, so check in and donate as often as you like. So without further delay, I leave you now with Tennessee Bureau of Workers' Compensation Administrator Abby Hudgens.
Thank you, Jay. Well, we've come to the end of this year's education conference. We are so glad that you've joined us and hope it has been a good experience for you. Before we say goodbye, I want to thank our sponsors again, whose support we appreciate immensely. In particular, I want to thank Tammy Jowers and Select Physical Therapy, who is our Zoom platform sponsor. Tammy, thank you, and especially thank you for our Happy Hour Tuesday. It's the first time we've ever had someone in a smoking jacket at one of our events. An unsung hero of the conference is our co-sponsor, the International Workers' Compensation Foundation. Eric Oxfeld, Executive Director, and Jeannie Bush, Conference Planning Manager, have provided the administrative support for our conference each year, which has allowed us to focus on program content. Thank you, Eric and Jeannie. A final and enormous thank you goes to the staff of the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. You've done a wonderful job of connecting with excellent speakers, providing program content, writing and performing in skits, moderating, and being a fountain of good ideas during the planning for the conference. There are two people from the Bureau whose contributions were indispensable. They are Kyle Jones, Communications Coordinator, and Jeff Francis, Assistant Administrator at the Bureau. For months, they have devoted time, ideas, technical expertise, and passion to provide you with the best possible conference. Words do not adequately describe how important they are to our conferences. Also, thank you to everyone who went to the pumpkin patch to make a contribution to Kids Chance. It's not too late, as Jay was telling you, so please go back and make another contribution or make the first one, and remember that 100% of all your contributions go to scholarships for the children of workers who have been killed or catastrophically injured in the line of duty. The conference theme this year has been Rethink Recovery, and I hope it has ignited sparks in each of you to rethink recovery in whatever area of workers' compensation you work. As we close the conference, it is time to move from listening to ideas to creating tomorrows for injured workers that have more possibilities for recovery than they have today. Whatever your role in workers' compensation is, you can make a difference in recovery. But now it's time to say goodbye, and we hope to see you at next year's conference, whether it is in person or virtual. In the meantime, stay safe and wear those masks.